there's obviously a lot of issues that were raised by the events of this week. And let me just get your take on this, because, I've talked about it with Digby on the show, but I'm interested in getting your take on this because, frankly, you have I think a fairly unique perspective on the way this information hits people outside of the media establishment. Yeah. Because my sense was, when I watched that press conference, and maybe I'm a little jaded, I do this every day, I looked at this and I go, that seems par for the course to me. I mean, there's nothing new here. But there were two things I noticed. One was that the establishment, and I would include in this like the media, political figures, they all, former national security people, it felt like there was a line that was crossed for them that went beyond this. And as the week progressed, it occurs to me that this is something that permeated the sort of low information, high information, political news follower. What's your take on that?
Sure. I think I think that you can really bring it down to just a couple of lines in Trump's remarks. And really at the heart of it is something that's been much repeated, but I don't think people have actually focused on it perhaps as deeply as they should. Donald Trump referenced his own advisors. He actually named people, right? And then he said, they've told me this, they've told me there's a problem, but I just talked to this, ex-KGB guy standing next to me, and he said that's not the case, so, let's not worry about it. And even went so far as to say, made a judgment call there. He said, I don't see why he would. I don't see why they would do it. Even to the most ardent Trump defender, that's sort of a red flag. That's essentially saying, I don't trust the people around me as much as I trust the word of this guy standing next to me, this very troublesome character standing next to me. And again, this is not about what you think of Trump. It's not what you think about Putin per se. It's not what you think about U.S.-Russian relations. It goes deeper than that. You have a president of the United States essentially saying he doesn't trust his own people. And
we should be clear.
Big deal.
This is not the unappointed deep state. These are all people that he's appointed. And it was so damaging to him that by Tuesday, he went out there and literally said, I actually meant to say, I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be Russia, as opposed to, I don't see any reason why it would be Russia. Like, he literally came out there and said, I actually just misspoke. That's how damaging.
Oh yeah.
That.
If you watch the press briefing, right? That's not the case.
No,
that's not at all the case. Because Trump laid things out, right? He specifically referred to these folks. Then he said, I just talked to this guy. He assures me. And then after that, he specifically said, something that was sympathetic to Putin's argument. Unless Trump is a completely incoherent human being, you can't construct your sentences that way. And so now he is.
He is, but I don't think that's going to fly. I mean, he went on and repeated.
He's lying in order to try and clean up a mess.
He repeated on multiple occasions that statement like, he didn't know me, there was 500 businessmen. I mean, he literally repeated it almost verbatim, accepting the argument as to why there wouldn't be any compromising information on him and whatnot. So broadly speaking, he accepted the premise. And really, that's a big deal. I agree. And what is also seemingly a big deal that got sort of, lost in this is that not only did his own appointed Dan Coates, director of national intelligence, say, hey, look, we have a lot of evidence that the Russian government attempted to interfere and did interfere in our election in several different ways. Not only did he say that, he said on that very day, the lights are flashing red like they did before 9/11 in anticipation of a continued assault on our elections in 2018. And that seems to have been largely ignored as part of this calculation. And thus, I think, what was probably at least partially an inspiration for your piece in The Nation.
Absolutely. In fact, Dan Coates has been a remarkable figure. If we had a media in this country that actually covered the White House, as opposed to covering Trump, right? And this is a big deal. We'd be thinking a lot more about what Dan Coates has been saying, because this guy has been really at the forefront of arguing, not for weeks, not for months, but for, pretty much since he's come into his position, that there's a serious issue here, that our elections are vulnerable. He has used terms like, as you say, the red alert and stuff like that, under attack. He has spoken frequently about, not what happened in 2016, but what might happen in 2018 or 2020. This is not a liberal Democrat. This is not somebody who, is an alarmist or anything like that. This is a very conservative Republican. I think a pretty patriotic guy I happen to disagree with on the vast majority of issues. But I think he's just come into this job. He looks at the information that comes before him. Because of his Senate experience, he's quite good at reviewing intelligence and weighing the different arguments, weighing the different concerns. And he's told us again and again and again that there's a threat. And this is what was so troubling about many of the responses from Democrats to some extent, but especially from Republicans and even from the most prominent Republicans to what Trump said in Helsinki. There was an almost universal condemnation. They're all like, oh, the president's wrong. Something did happen in 2016. Paul Ryan even used the word or talked about sort of ongoing threats. He adopted some of these concerns, about a continuous threat. And yet none of them said, and there's a logical step that we can take right now. And that is that with just months to go before the 2018 elections, with the 2020 election cycle really already starting to gin up, we can secure our elections. We should be putting resources and energy into securing our elections, taking the steps at the federal level that are possible and necessary, but also providing the resources and the support for the officials at the state level to assure that our elections are not meddled with by outside interests and also by any domestic players. It should be an across-the-board moment of absolute, unified, bipartisan support for securing our elections. And, the weird thing about it, Sam, is it's possible. It's not as hard as I think some people might imagine, but our leaders aren't talking about it.
John, let's take a break. When we come back, I want to talk about how that would happen and more about the sort of, I guess there's some progress insofar as we're at least seeing some, superficial appeals to concern. And, but I don't know that we're not just looking at lip service when it comes to folks like Paul Ryan. When we come back, you can tell us your thoughts on that. I'm Sam Seder. I'm talking to the great John Nichols. I'll be right back after this. Ring of Fire Radio.